Hello and welcome. My name is Chris Can with Mining Journal, and with me I have Sustainable Development Expert Sheila Khama. Sheila is a non-executive director of FTSE, NASDAQ, and ASX listed entities. She's run compliance divisions for diversified mining groups, and she's worked at the World Bank and African Development Bank on extractive policy. In the first interview of this two-part series with Sheila, we're going to look at the opportunity presented by the emergence of Saudi Arabia as a mining power in that region. Hi, Sheila, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I look forward to the conversation with you.
Terrific. Yeah, specifically, Sheila, what does the opportunity actually look like for African nations with Saudi championing this regional development plan through Vision 2030?
Well, I think perhaps the single most important thing is that if you reflect back on history, African governments in relation to trade, but specifically the development of minerals, have always traded towards primarily Europe, to a less extent the United States, and more recently China. What the Saudis do with this initiative is that they offer the African countries an opportunity essentially to do something they've never done before, which is to break rank with the very history that many of them are weary of. But also, what we know about the Saudis in their ability to steward the development of petroleum sector is that they have been very successful. The truth is that we can't always say that on the African continent. And so there's an opportunity here also for peer learning to use the lessons that the Saudis have learned from how they manage petroleum and how they transform the economy, and to use that to improve and take opportunity for the growth that we know is going to happen thanks to demand for what are now called critical minerals.
Okay, and how should African leaders be looking to position themselves to make that successful leap?
So I think a very important thing is two things. One, to recognize that wherein the minerals that have now been positioned that's critical are really critical to Europe and America's transition from a fossil fuel-based industrial order to one that is cleaner in terms of energy and emission of carbon or dioxide. The Africans ought to position themselves to really be the champion for what Europe should have done had science and mankind known better. So Africans can champion a completely new order, partnering with the Saudis and others, such that what Europe is having to undo, the Africans merely start from, because Africans have not yet industrialized. And so they can start from a clean slate and become the champions for what mining and industrialization, use of metals in the new dispensation looks like.
As you said, Sheila, there's been a rich history in Africa of in civilization, essentially, depending on how far you want to go back, but then also mineral development. But there have been some hiccups. Africa hasn't always made the most of opportunities to develop their individual countries, developing their extractive sectors. Some have obviously done better than others. Can you see this as potentially another false dawn for Africa? Or do you think that the injection of capital and potentially that focus, as you said, in terms of extractive expertise coming from Saudi Arabia, can that make the difference this time around?
So what is going to make a difference is two things. First of all, African governments are now masters and mistresses of their own fate. They are not looking over the shoulder and really marching to the orders of a colonial power. I think this is different because it means essentially that the ball is firmly and squarely in the course of the African governments. But it also means that the African governments have to think in terms of what their needs are, and not to define their needs based on Europe's needs. The third most important thing is that African governments must govern better in the natural resource space than they have hitherto. Because if they are not seen to govern better, it is unlikely, one, that they will attract investment in production of minerals, but also in processing and then fabrication. But it is also unlikely that they will be able to offer the Saudis the necessary value proposition to become the partners that the Saudis are looking for. The Minister of Petroleum and the Minister of Finance were very clear at the last meeting. The Saudis are looking to use these partnerships to fire up their industry. And so to succeed, the Africans must understand this need and say, what then becomes our value proposition? I don't see the Africans succeeding in capitalizing on this new dawn unless they can answer that question of the value proposition to themselves based on what they perceive as the value proposition from the Saudis and other partners, for that matter, to themselves. And if they don't do that, to your point, it'll be an opportunity lost.
Okay, we are going to touch on a few of the hurdles and challenges and what those governing, green flags look like in another interview. I just wanted to finish by asking you the broader question, Sheila, around what you see for the region, given this very real influx of expertise and probably more importantly, capital and then partnerships as well. What do you see Africa looking like in 15 years' time if different governments can take that step, improve their governance and take advantage of this opportunity?
Well, I think success in terms of the opportunities we see now in Africa must be defined in probably one single important thing, which is to reverse the trend in which Africa has been a net exporter of the materials to become something of a balance, because Africa still needs to export, because Africa needs the revenue to invest back into industry. But Africa needs to also now think not just about mineral development policy, but industrial development policy. In my mind, this is the missing link. The assumption that if you just have minerals, you industrialize is false. And there's no greater proof than where we are today in Africa. And I think to respond successfully, governments must do, by and large, what the Saudis are saying. We see minerals not an end in itself, but as a vehicle for us to fire up our industries. They too have to do this, and they have to be very specific about what those minerals are that they need, because those minerals are not necessarily the same that China and the United States and everyone else needs.
Sheila, that's all we've got time for, but thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed speaking with you.